So we're holding on 8B4. Once again, the shear is the shear we're giving the Zeicha Refuah Shleima for my granddaughter in the Bracha Bas Semagoga, and the continued Refuah Shleima for Yosef Ben Sarah Jeff Karp, who thank goodness I heard from Erev Yontif on Friday. He's thank God doing much better, and hopefully we'll have him back soon. There you go. Very good. So says the Gemara like this: we're holding 8B4. Daf Ches Amud Beis, all the way on the bottom, about
4 lines.
Amar Rav Chanan, 4 lines from the bottom. Amar Rav Chanan. We're talking about over here about the volume. It got involved, amazingly enough, in Shekalim about the Arba Kaisis, about the 4 cups of wine. Amazing how these things have a way of working out. Just as an aside, I know I mentioned it to Charlie, but it's good to mention again. Kais is Gematria 86. Elokim, Midas Hadin, is also 86. Says the Chassam Sofer in the it says that's the reason why we don't ask the questions on the 4 cases, because it's true that the 4 cases are the Arba Lashonis of Geula, but in order to have 4 Lashonis of Geula, it means that you have to go 4 times into Golus. You have to go 4 times into the diaspora. So we don't want to discuss it too much. We don't want to bring in the Midas Hadin too much. The Chassam Sofer on Shas. Beautiful Chassam Sofer. Anyways, so in that discussion, we got to the idea of how much has to go into a kais in order to be good. And the answer, of course, always is a revius. Whatever a revius is the shear. And as always is the case, it's 1 part water, 1 part wine, 3 parts water. Wine by itself was called chai, raw wine, because it was so strong. Undiluted wine was a very questionable as really a good wine for the Arba Kaisis, because it's really very difficult to drink. So it was 1 part wine, 3 parts water in the norm, but together you had to get to this revius. And that's where we're at over here. So now we got some measuring cups. Amar Reb Chanan, Luga diaraisa, the biblical lug is equal in volume to the old tumnasa atika demur yasa ditzipari, the old tumnasa measurement that was used for measuring fish fats in tzipari. Amar Rav Yoina, v'chachmei, and I remember this utensil, this measuring cup, the base Rav Yanai mechilim b'davash, that in Rav Yanai's household they measured honey with it. The point was this was a standardized measuring cup. Another way to figure out a revius. Okay, a lug, by the way, a lug is 4 reviuses. So by filling up a lug's equivalent of Tamaisa, right, you were able to get 4 cups of equal value, each one being a revius, and that's why they used the Tumnasa. Tanya, they learned, a revius is equal to Chatzi Shemini Tivronis, the Tiberian half Sheminis. We're on Tes Amid Aleph, Hayishana. We are on 9A1 on today's daf. Hayishana, the old one. In other words, the half Sheminis was once used in Tiberia. It was exactly a revius. Fine, Mazel Tov. Rabbi Yochanan Hadei Didon, who, in fact, that old Chatzi Sheminis Tivronis is in fact equal to the exact same shia that we use today. In that case, speaks the Gemara, B'lama Karelei Atika, why is it called old? Min Begida, Habibi Yoima, considering that we still use it today. So it's not old. What's that saying of old? So the answer is, because at that time, somewhere along the way historically, the basic measuring stick changed, even though the name of the measuring stick didn't change. Istami dahabe zeiris virapsa. There was some say that it was originally small and then became large. The istiami da zero v'leya zero kama dahabe. Other ones say that after being enlarged, it was then reduced, but it was not reduced to the size that it was originally. So therefore, we had to be more clear. But at the end of the day, everything came back to the way it is. Why do we really care about this? And the answer is standardization that we know today. An inch is an inch, a foot is a foot, a yard is 3 feet, so on and so forth. Measurement standardization was still being put into place in the ancient world because kalim were not mass produced in the way that we're so used to today in a throwaway world, where we expect to go to the hardware store, we expect to go to the grocery store to see, and everything is there at our fingertips. You can go on to Amazon. So for an example, last night, my grandson, who had a lot of fun stealing my Afikomen twice, already has one of his Afikomen presents on his way. Because Amazon, in about 30 seconds, I was able to find him a train set on Amazon, and boom, Thomas the train set, and in about 30 seconds, boom, he's got it on the way. That was not the way. We have to kind of remember the world that we all came from. The world that we all came from, that our children will never know, and our grandchildren and great-grandchildren certainly will never know. A world where instant gratification was not there. And so measuring sticks from city to city and place to place were not completely standardized. And the Gemara was working on, in many places, strives to get to a standardization of shiurim, and that's why it makes a big deal about it. So go further. Kami says the Gemara, Kami shir shokais. What is exactly the size of a cup that holds exactly a revius? Rabbi Yosi b'shem Rabbi Yosi ben Pazi, Rabbi Yosi bar Bibi b'shem Rabbi Shmuel. They all say etzba'ayim al roim etzba u'mechzel shleisha etzba. 2 finger breadths long by 2 finger breadths wide, with a height of 1.5 finger breadths plus a third of a finger breadth. Look at number 4 in the art scroll. Bottom line, it equals 7.33 cubic finger breadths, as it mentions over there in the art scroll. In fact, this is a problem because in Masechtas Pesachim that we just learned less than a month ago, in Arei Pesachim, the shear is 10.8 cubic finger breadths. So the Rishonim are busy with this. This goes into the machlokes of what is a shear revius, what is the cup. That's why you always hear, when you hear a Shabbos HaGadol drasha, is it 2.8? Is it 2.8? Is it 5.2? Right? The shear, the Chazon Ish, or that. So this is where the basis of the differences in shiurim come about. The Gemara said before that in order to be chayiv, to be held liable for walking on Shabbos and carrying on Shabbos wine, the basic amount is, of course, a revius. What happens if the wine is sitting around and congeals and becomes a solid? Or to put this another way, if you put the wine in the freezer and you make an ice cube out of it, how much of the hard ice cube is equal to the amount of a revius? What is the revius's counterpart in a solid? Says the Gemara. Tani yavesh kizayis divrei Rab Nosson. We learn in a Brisa, in order to be mechayiv on Shabbos carrying, right? If it congealed, if you made it into an ice cube, it's the size of a zayis, of an olive. So an olive-sized piece is equal to a revius in liquid. A revius of liquid is equal to a kezayis in a solid. Rabbanan the Kisri, the Rabbanan of the city of Kisaria, the Rabbi Yosi bar Bibi b'shem Shmuel said the following: Asya the Rab Nosson to Rab Shimon. The ruling of Rab Nosson follows Rab Shimon, who says in the Mishnah in Masechtas Shabbos that the minimum of all liquids, including wine, is a revius. Kamo de Rav Shimon Amar b'Revius. Any place where Rav Shimon said a liquid requires a Revius, Kach Amar Rav Nosson b'Revius l'kishri v'hu b'ay kazayis. Rav Nosson is coming to tell us the equivalent of a Revius in liquid is a zayis, the size of an olive in a solid. Very good. So now, this before we get to the next piece of Gemara, here's a question regarding a nevela. A nevela is a non-kosher animal that dies. It becomes a nevela. The skin, the flesh, conveys tameh, conveys contamination. Nothing else about the behemoth conveys tameh. Not its hooves, not its bones, not its sinois, right? Not its horns. They're all not considered as major parts of the animal with regard to tameh. What is mitame? A person who conveys tumah is the meat part, the flesh part of an animal. The question is, dam, the blood of a nevela. Is it considered as something separate from the flesh, so it too does not convey tameh? It also does not convey contamination, or no, the blood is considered part of the flesh. It does convey tameh. The only question is, how much blood do I need to have in order for it to have the power to convey tameh? Okay, so the question is about tameh, whether it too conveys tameh in a nevela, dam, whether it conveys tameh in a nevela. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's no different than the hooves and the horns, or no, it does, but it has to have a certain minimum shear in order to convey tameh. Says the Gemara, Rav Simon b'Shem Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rav Shimon said in the name of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. It happened that a mule, which is a non-kosher animal, of Rebbe in the house of Rebbe HaKadosh, passed away. The Torah dama mishum nevela, and they were mitar the blood that it was not tameh on account of nevela. So on a simple reading of this case, it seems to be they held that the dam, the blood of a nevela, is no different than the hooves and the horns. It does not convey tameh. But as we're going to see, not exactly. The Shah Rabbi Elazar as Rebbe Simon, Ad Kama. What did they roll? Until what amount of blood did they roll that it's still tar? Did they rule that unequivocally blood is not flesh, and therefore it's no different than the horns or the bones, and it never conveys tameh, it's tar? Or no, in fact, it is like the flesh. And the only question was, how much dam was around? In other words, maybe there was only a too small amount of dam, and that's why they were mitar. Why ashkechbei? Rav Simon did not pay any attention to him and did not respond. Shal Rabbi Shua ben Levi. So Eliezer went to Rabbi Shua ben Levi himself. Rabbi Shua ben Levi was the posek, was the halakhic posek in the house of Rebbe HaKadosh, as we're going to see. And he answered him, Ad revius tar, up to a revius dam, the blood is tar. Yaisim a revius tameh, but more than a revius is tameh. In other words, we do hold that the blood of a nevela is just like its basar, just like its flesh, and just like the flesh conveys tameh, so too does the blood convey tameh. But the blood needs to have at least the minimum shear of more than a revius. And it's interesting to note, it says yaisem a revius, which means simply that a revius itself would not convey. It's ad veloy ad b'chla. Ad revius tar, yaisem a revius tameh. More than a revius is tameh. But a revius itself would seem to be tar. Says the Gemara Vayter. Now we're on 9A2. 9A2. Uba'ash. The Rabbi Elazar And in fact, Rabbi Elazar got upset with Rabbi Simon, who he asked originally why he did not respond with what the halach is. Okay, so weiter goes further. Rabbi Yosef Masni Hodein Ubda. Rabbi was clear in repeating the accident of the mule that died in Rebbe's house, and they ruled that the blood was tar, but again it was unclear whether they said that the blood was tar because blood is always tar in an avela, or no, it's really like basa and it's tameh, but the only thing is there wasn't enough of it. Amalei Rav Yitzchak bar Bisna, okay, asked him until what amount was it ruled to be tar? Is it any amount or there's a minimum? Ad Ravi is tar, Yasimikan tameh, who bought the bay, and instead of answering the question, Rabbi spurred Rav Yitzchak ben Bisna. So Amalei Rav Zurika, so Rav Zurika said to Rabbi, begin to Sharlei at Bote Bay, because Rav Yitzchak wanted to ask you a question, you spur him? You push him away? Amalei, begin the loy habis dati bi bitnebei. No, it's because my cup, my head, was absent at the time. I was preoccupied by something else. The Amar Rab Chanan, the heavy chayecha tuluyim v'cha mineged. When the Torah says your life will hang in the balance, this means zeshel keach chitim l'shana. That means one who buys wheat each year. So the guy has enough money to buy what he needs for wheat for this year. But that's not a raya that next year he's going to have enough money to buy wheat. He doesn't have his own field. He's not cultivating his own wheat. So he has to buy wheat. So now he's always worried. He says, okay, this year I have enough wheat. But who says I'm going to have enough money to buy wheat next year? And maybe there won't be any wheat in the marketplace. Daddy, we're on 982. 982. The left-hand column. The left-hand column in the middle.
Yeah,
your life will hang in the balance. This refers to one who buys wheat each year because he doesn't have his own wheat crop. So he's totally b'das acherim. He's always tied to the marketplace and his ability to pay every year. Next, the pasuk goes further. And you will be frightened night and day. This is one who buys grain from the merchant in small quantities. He doesn't even have enough money to buy a full year's worth of wheat. He has to go every month and buy wheat. That's much more frightening. Maybe every month the guy won't have the wheat. Maybe he won't have the money next month. And you will not be sure of your life, says the pasuk. This is one who has to go to the bakery every day to buy his bread because he has no money to stock up on his own wheat. Every day he's got to generate money to buy his bread to live. And said Rabbi, and I, so michna apalter. I rely on the baker for my bread. So I'm always worried that every day I may not have enough money to buy the bread from the baker. So when he asked me the question, my head was busy with this. And so when Rabbi Yitzchak asked me the question.
When you go to, when you hear a Musa Schmutz, they always say you have to have the Tochen on Rabbanu Shloim, right? You don't have to worry. Now, what's the name? Those Rabbonim, they were big tzaddikim. So why was he worried about what's going to be tomorrow if he has or if he doesn't have? He's not supposed to worry.
So let me tell you a story about Reb Chaim Brisker, the great Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, right? The grandfather of Yosef Beis Soloveitchik, of all the Soloveitchiks, right? The son of the Beis Halevi. He used to say regarding Shidduchim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mizabik zevukim. You don't even have to do hishtadlus. You don't even have to do any hishtadlus. The shidduch will come by itself for your kids. So then Reb Chaim said, so why do I worry? Reb Chaim said this. You don't have to have any ishtadlus. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in charge. He says to them, why am I worried? So he answered, from an eigen nerven, from my own nerves. In other words, people are human. Yes, I have bitochen, but my stomach is growling because I'm starving. Those are not two separate things. We are not malachim. We are not angels. Yes, we have to have munah bitochen. You know what a munah bitochen means? Putting one foot in front of the other. It doesn't mean that you're not scared. Right. It says, I'm scared. And right. I'm still going to put one foot in front of the other. The famous story, Daddy, you told it to us so many times, from the story in the Gemara of the mighty oak tree. The short and long of the story is there's a mighty oak tree that's saying, I'm the greatest tree in the forest. And he's a big braggart. And in the bottom is this little reed. And finally he gets tired of hearing the thing, and he calls up to this reed, to the tree, he says, be quiet. And the tree looks down and sees this little reed blowing in the wind. And he says, you're a nothing. Anyways, a big storm comes, and the tree is going, I'm the mighty oak tree. And the poor grass is going back and forth, swinging in the wind. And all of a sudden, crack. And the oak tree, which is standing like this, the wind comes, and as it happens in Florida during the rainy season, a tornado, what happens? The tree came crashing down. The reed was blowing like this and like that. When the storm passed, it slowly stopped and came back again. Right? One of my favorite stories. It turns out it's a story in the Gemara that my father was telling, and the oak tree is Rome, and the reed, of course, is the Jews. Right? We bow in the wind. But when the wind passes, when the Holocaust passes, and we walk out of the concentration camps, my mother, Aleha Shalom, used to say, what was remarkable in that in 1945, there was 2 million Jewish refugees. By 1950, there wasn't one Jewish refugee in the entire world. In 5 years, every Jew found this place. Maybe not perfectly, maybe psychologically damaged, but everybody found their place. The Palestinians are still sitting in concentration, in refugee camps, 6 generations, 80, 90 years, 70-something years later. It's not the Jewish way. The answer is, Daddy, we're not a people that stick their heads like ostriches into the ground. Right. Being afraid is human. And Munah and B'tochen says, Hatikva, tomorrow will be better. The hope, right. Tomorrow will be better. We live with the past, but we live in the present. A Jew puts one foot in front of the other. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan could say, Kol ma di ovid rachmana l'tavu di ovid. All that Hashem does for good is for good.
For the good.
And the same Rabbi Yochanan would carry a bone in his pocket of his 10th child that died. Right. He had 10 sons and they all died. And he walked around with an etzba ketana in his pocket, which meant that psychologically Rabbi Yochanan was devastated. He walked around with a bone of his 10th dead child, his 10th dead child in his pocket. And then on the other hand, he can say, all that God does is for good. I don't understand it. I don't know the why of it. Nonetheless, I step forward. That's what it is. When a guy has a Munah B'tochen and says, I'm not worrying about anything, he's an idiot. This is the famous story of the guy who there's a flood, and he climbs to the top of top of his house, and a rowboat comes by and says, get in. He says, no, I'm relying on God. He's going to save me. And then the helicopter comes, And the helicopter says, climb up on the ladder. And he says, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. And then finally he dies because the waters come up. And then he gets to heaven. And he says, well, I was such a good guy. I had complete belief that you were going to save me. So God says, yeah, I sent you a rowboat. When you didn't get the message, I sent you a helicopter to go save you. Right? That's the quintessential Jewish story. Anyways, let's go further. We're on 982, 982, right-hand corner. Right-hand column. So the Gemara says, Miu b'dain. So what exactly is the halacha? What about the blood of a nevela? Is it tamei or no? It's tahor only up to a revius, but more than a revius, it's tamei. Hayid Rabbi Yeshua ben Pesaira, where he says Rabbi Yeshua ben Pesaira, which is really Rabbi Yeshua ben Beseira, al dam nevela shehutar, that the dam of nevela is tar, which seems to say, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira was the paisik in the house of Rabbi HaKadosh. So it seems to say that the blood of a nevela is completely tar, just like the hooves and the horns. No, mahu tar. What does it mean tar? Tar milahachshir. It means it's tar that blood is excluded. This blood is excluded from rendering food susceptible to tummy. If you remember that all foods have to be machshir lekabel tumah. All foods have to be wetted, have to be washed in order to now be ready to be susceptible to become tameh. In other words, so they have to be washed. Blood is one of those 7 liquids. But he's saying the blood of a nevela is not one of those 7 liquids. And if it happens to have touched the blood of a nevela, that does not make it machshir to me royal lekabel tumah. But with regard to contaminated food that was previously already susceptible to tumah, it does contaminate when, just like the flesh of a nevela, i.e. at the shear of a revius. Tamar Tanina, but we learned in a Mishnah, dam sheretz kibasroi, the dam of a sheretz, of a creepy, crawly thing, is like its flesh. Mitama ve'ena machshir, it transmits tummy, but it itself cannot make something susceptible to tummy. And we have nothing else like it, which seems to imply that the bloods of all other creatures are not tameh. So how could you tell me that the blood of a nevela is tameh and does convey? It should say the blood of a nevela should be like all other animals except the sheretz and not convey tameh at all. And for the Gemara,
isn't that a contradiction? In order to be machshir, you have to touch the blood has to touch the food, right?
Right.
But if you say that the blood contaminates, then it's going to contaminate it anyway.
Right. Yeah. So it is. So the answer is you're putting your finger on a very important site. That in fact the Gemara is telling us, since Tumah and Tahara, purity and contamination is not real. It's not mamoshes. You can't touch it. I can't really tell you what it is. Those rules do not apply. All these rules are floating in heaven. These are the rules. A, is it a liquid? You've got 2 different things here. Is it considered a liquid so that it could make something else or no? It's not a liquid. It's considered flesh. It's considered basar. You hear that? The blood of an nevela does not have a din of masheh. Does not have a din of liquid. It has a din of flesh. Flesh cannot.
Okay. You're not coming through the voices. Yeah. All right. Okay.
Something. Does it make it better? brother McCollum. No, it does not.
It's Chuck.
I'm saying
It's not clear.
You're breaking up, you
the of flesh. And it hasn't been a
No, it's breaking up.
flesh, which means they could convey Tomei, but on the flip side, it's not liquid that makes something susceptible. Yeah, Charlie? Whoops, I think we're, Charlie, can you hear me? Yes. Charlie? It's not clear? Okay, hang on 1 second. Hang on 1 second. I'm switching. I'm going to switch to my phone. Hang on 1 second. I'm going to switch to my phone. Yeah. I'm switching to my phone. Hold on a second. I'm going to go like this. Give me a second. Okay. But here we go. Hang on. Let me see if I can find out. Hang on.
I love about Zoom.
See him. Hang on. I'm going to my phone here.
It's breaking up. It's not. The connection is no good.
Should we redo it?
Hang on. Here we go. No. Come on. Where is it? I think. What? Is it out or not? If it's still no good, let me know because I'm trying to find. Give me a second. I'm trying to get to log in. Give me a second. I'm trying to log in on my phone. Here we go. Give me a
There he
second. I'm
is.
logging in on my phone. You know the video. Hold on.
Hold on. Here we go.
Okay, hold on. Here we go.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Can you hear me better?
Yeah, but you have to get rid of the other image.
I am. I'm getting rid of. Here we go. Okay. So here we go. Do you guys, Charlie, can you hear me now?
You're beautiful.
Thank you very much. Okay. So here we go. Okay. Here we go. I switched to my phone. Sometimes it seems to work better. So once again, my father, he's asked the question, how can you say this? On the one hand, the blood does not make things susceptible to Tomei. On the flip side, it does. Is my father there, by the way? Daddy, are you there?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm here.
Good, because I can't see you on my phone. Okay. So my father said that on the one hand, you're telling me that the blood can't make things susceptible, but the flip side, you're telling me that the blood itself is Tomei and that it can convey Tomei. Make up your mind. But the answer is we're saying something very fundamental here. The blood of a Nevela has the rule of being like the flesh. So we're going to look at the blood not as a liquid, but as like its flesh, just like the flesh of a Nevela. And nothing else of a Nevela is mitame. The horns and the hoofs do not mitame, only the flesh. The dam is like flesh. But because it's like flesh cannot make something else susceptible to tame.
Okay.
That's the logic. You understand? The logic is, what is the blood? If you look at the blood in essence, yes, that blood is what? Is liquid. Says the Gemara, not by a nevela. By a nevela, if you want to say that it's tamei, that it could convey further tamei,
yeah, that you could say.
Flesh. But if it's like the flesh, it can't convey. It can't make something. You can't be machshir. You can't make something susceptible. Okay. Empathy Gemara on the bottom of 982 says the Gemara, Kishia Tumasa. When the Mishnah says that the blood of a sheretz and the Ein Lanu Kiyotzapa, we have nothing else like it, it means that no blood is comparable to the blood of a sheretz with regard to the unique measure of its tamei. The blood of a sheretz is different, that it transmits tamei at the shear of a lentil bean, not the shear of a revius. 983, just like the flesh of the sheretz. The blood of a nevela, we're on 983. We turned the page, we're on 983. Okay, the blood of a nevela, however, does not transmit tumah in the same measure as the flesh of a nevela. For the flesh of a nevela, it does it at the shear of a kezayit, whereas the blood transmits only with the shear of a revius. Why? Because the reality is that too is the same shear. Because the shear of a liquid is a revius when it's congealed. We said a revius congealed equals a zayis, equals an olive. That's how we started the Gemara. That a liquid volume of revius is a kizayis when it congeals. The mela, it goes together. To the basic law of Tumah, the blood of a nevela does in fact transmit Tumah kibasrai, like its flesh, like the flesh. So since the blood has a din of flesh of basar, it could be metame, it could convey tomei, but just like flesh cannot be machshir, cannot make something susceptible, so to the blood of the nevela cannot make something susceptible. Says the Gemara Vaita, we're on 983, the left-hand column. Amar Rav Yosi, Pligi but Trey Amoraim. Two Amoraim argue about this. Chad Amar Tomei, one says the blood of the baby is Tomei if it's more than a revius. The Chad Amar Tar, Madi Amar Tomei, ki Rabbi Yehuda, like Rabbi Yehuda, Madi Amar Tar, ki Rabbi Yeshua ben Besaira. Because this price, it says Rabbi Yehuda ben Besaira, when he says, Rabbi Yehuda ben Besaira says before that it's tar, he meant tar completely, not tar up to a revius. Amalei Rab Abduma Demin Mechusa V'yayus, and it is correct that Rabbi Yehuda considers the blood tamei when it's revius or more. The Rabbi Yehuda by Rana the Beinis Hava, because Rabbi Yehuda was the halachic authority of the household of the Nasi of Rebbe's home, and since the case of the mule dying and paskening it was tar al karchach, we are forced to say that Rabbi Yehuda was saying because it was had less than a revius volume of blood, that's why it was tar. But if it had more than a revius of the blood, it would have been tamei. Now, we said in the Mishnah that those who took out the money from the Shekalim, from the lishcha, from the chamber, were not allowed to wear cuffs on the bottom of their pants. They weren't allowed to wear shoes or sandals, tefillin, or even a kameya, an amulet. Shema yani b'yanu, because maybe they become poor, and people will say they became poor because they stole from the trade. They stole from the lishcha, from the skull. And the Gemara says as follows: Tani Rabbi Yishmael said, "Kavutz lo Yisrael." A long-haired person is not allowed to perform the avodah b'pnei akashad because of suspicion that maybe he's hiding coins in his hair. Tani had the gizbarim ayum mafsikim b'kilim. The gabayim would separate the strands of his wooden garment so that no money would be concealed there. Tani midabrim hayu imay. They would talk with him. Mishashu nichnas hachu shal yaitze. From the time he entered into the treasury chamber until he left. So let's fill his mouth up with water before he enters, so that prevents him from putting any coins in his mouth. And for the Gemara, because of the bracha that he has to say prior to taking out the money, he has to make a bracha. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam asher kedishanu b'mitzvayis v'tzivanu lahafresh teruma, to take out teruma. So when the question is, if he's such a tzaddik that he has to make the bracha, we're going to worry about him then stealing the money, right? Talk about something that's a contradiction. So for this, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yishmael bar Nachman b'shem Rabbi Yonason, b'Torah b'Neviim u'b'Ketsuvim k'matzinu, sha'adam tzarich lotzeis yidei abriyos kederach shu tzarich lotzeis yidei hamakai, that a person must satisfy the scrutiny of human beings just as he must satisfy the scrutiny of the omnipresent. Tahainu, even if he's perfectly clear between him and God, I didn't steal anything. Nonetheless, he has to make sure that there's no suspicion. It's not enough to say the Rebbeinu Shalom knows I'm good. And what do I care about people? That doesn't work. Test Summit Bay, we're up to 984. Sorry, 984. B'Torah Minayin, 984, right before the Mishnah, right before Halacha Gimel. Okay, 984, the bottom of the Amid. B'Torah Minayin, Diksiv v'Yisem Nekim Hashem v'Yizmi Yisrael, and you shall be innocent in the eyes of Hashem and Klal Yisrael. This story is the story of the Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven, and Chatzi Sheva Menashe, who came to Moshe Rabbeinu and Parshas Matos, and came to him and said, we want to stay on the east side of the Yarden, of the Jordan River, and Moshe lets him have it for 9 psukim. For 9 psukim, how could you do this? Stay here, and your brothers are all going to go fight in Eretz Yisrael. And they said, Chas v'sholem, that's not what we have in mind. We have not in mind. Of course, we're going to go fight. And then we're going to come back and settle this land. And they did. They were the last people to settle. For 21 years, they didn't come back to their lands, to their wives and children. They stayed and they fought the wars. And so Moshe Rabbeinu said, "V'yisem nekiyim Hashem Yisrael." And if that's the case, you shall be innocent in the eyes of Hashem and Yisrael. So the question was, if of course they were going to fight, why did they let Moshe Rabbeinu rank them out for 9 psukim? Said so there was a story with the Sfas Emes, who lived by his grandfather Chedushi Arim, and one time the Sfas Emes did not make it to Shachris, so the Chedushi Arim went into the dormitory and woke up the Sfas Emes and gave him a mussar shmooze, let him have it for a half hour why he overslept, and afterwards the Sfas Emes explained that he actually was up a whole night working on a hard taisvis, and he davened the Seekin, he davened early in the morning Shachris. So the Chedushi Arim asked the Sfas Emes, so why did you let me rank you out for a half hour? So the Sfas Emes said, I could hear Mussar from my grandfather for a half hour. I shouldn't hear the Mussar. So the Chedushi Arim then wrote, that's why the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven let Moshe rank them out for 9 psukim. They could hear Mussar from Moshe Rabbeinu. They shouldn't hear Mussar from Moshe Rabbeinu. But the truth is, Klal Yisrael always suspected Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, even though they were perfectly. V'haraya, look at the next piece of Gemara. B'neviim minayin. How do we see this in the Nevi'im? Diksiv, because it says, El Elokim Yisrael hu yodeya. Almighty God Hashem, He knows, and Hashem shall know. You know what the case was over there? That was the case. That was the case in Yeshua. In the case of Yeshua, Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven, and Chatzi Sheva Menashe put up a huge monument on their side of the Yarden. The other Yeshvatim, thinking that they were about to serve Avodah Zarah, got ready to attack them. And they came, but they asked the friend, they said, no, Chas v'sholem, of course we're not doing it. Hashem knows why we're doing it. We're doing it as a monument to let everybody know that even this side of the Yarden, Trans-Jordan, is part of Eretz Yisrael. Even though it's on the east of Jordan, the fact is Jordan is part of Eretz Yisrael, of Greater Eretz Yisrael. They were suspected the whole time, and therefore, 800 years later, they were the first people to go into Golus in the diaspora at the end of the era of the first Beis Hamikdash. They were the people who went into Golus 100 years earlier than the other Shabbatim. Why? Because they were always suspected by the other Shvatim that they didn't really want to come and fight for Eretz Yisrael. They were Nekiim in the eyes of Hashem. They were clean in the eyes of Hashem. Not enough. Iksuvim minayin, iksuvim, where is it said, iksiv, umatzachem b'seichel toiv b'einei elikim b'yodam. And find favor and good understanding in the eyes of Hashem and man. Gamliel Gezuka Shol Rabbi Yossi Bar Pun. Which verse is the clearest of them all? The one that started it all. And you should be innocent in the eyes of Hashem and Israel. Is anybody okay if we go a little further? It's 9 o'clock. I'd like to go to 9:15. Daddy, is Charlie still there or Charlie left already? Are you the only one?
I can't see
Then it's just me and you. So we're going to go further.
I'm here. No, I'm still here.
Okay,
Oh,
Charlie's
good.
here.
Are we
Charlie's
okay?
here.
Charlie,
I'm
is
good.
it okay? Is it
Good,
okay if we
good.
go a little further?
Absolutely.
Very good. Says Biden. Shall base Rabbi Gamliel hoya nichnas v'shoklei ben etzbaisav. The members of Rabbi Gamliel's household would enter the treasury when they were removing the shekels for the communal offerings. They would enter with the money, the shekels between their fingers, and they would throw it before the one performing the kohen, performing the withdrawal from the lishka. And the one performing the withdrawal would intentionally push it into the box so that their coins would definitely be used with the first separation of the coins. So their money was definitely being used to buy the communal kabbalas. And the Gemara is going to talk about it. The one performing the withdrawal does not withdraw until he requires of the administrator, shall I withdraw? Withdraw, which was always the standard. You said it 3 times, like Kadosh, 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 right? 3 times, and then what to make the point. After he withdrew from the first withdrawal, 15 days before Pesach, he would cover the remaining coins with a leather cover, because now the remaining coins that weren't being used, were called shirayim, leftovers, which were now put to the side. Now hashniya, the ones that were being done 15 days before Shavuos, he would take from them the chipa mekabliyas, and then he would cover up their money. Hashalishis done before Sukkot, this he didn't cover up already. And why did they cover up the first and the second? Because maybe he'll forget and withdraw money from the first, from which money had already been withdrawn. Once the money was withdrawn the first time from that box, that was enough. That money is now off the table, no longer is usable from, according to the Tanakama, to buy communal offerings to carbon seaboards. Torah Mesarisha and the Shem Eretz Yisrael, they would withdraw the first withdrawal on behalf of the inhabitants of Eretz Yisrael, because their money obviously was the one that was the easiest to get to the Lishka, the Beis Hamikdash. The Sheni L'Shem Karachim HaMekufima. The second was the inhabitants of the city were on 985 surrounding Eretz Yisrael. This is Amoin and Moav. The Shekalim maybe couldn't get there for Nisan, but it could definitely get there for Shavuos. V'ashlishi l'shem Bovel, l'shem Modai, l'shem were on 9B, 9BA, 9B1. Medina Sarachakais, and the inhabitants of the distant countries who definitely could not get their money there in time, and so they got their money there by the summertime, and so they were part of the last withdrawal. So the Gemara says as follows: Shall base Rabbi Gamliel, the members of Rabbi Gamliel's household would enter with the shekalim between their fingers, and they would give it and they would throw it, and the guy and the person withdrawing would deliberately push their money in so that it would be included. It would be included in the first withdrawal for the communal offerings. Number one, why was the money in between their fingers? So nobody should think that they were bribing the guy who was in charge of the money. They put the money. They made sure the money was clear and it was thrown. It was obvious what was happening. So, Freit the Gemara, Ilu hayu shnei kiroyim v'torim meyachem mehem al chaverin. After there were 2 heaps of grain of produce in somebody's possession, and he separated truma from one heap upon the other, right? Would he not therefore exempt the other heap from truma? Of course he would, right? Truma would be given for everything. So in other words, why did Rabbi Gamliel's family have to go through this whole business? Why did they have to go through this whole business? The truth of the matter is, what he called the rule is that all Jews are involved in the Shekalim, even those who hadn't yet given their money. The components that were brought, the carbon sibus, the communal offerings, was brought in the name of everybody, whether your money was used, whether your money wasn't used. So therefore, why did they have to go make this whole big deal of making sure that their money was used? It didn't add anything to the avodah. And for the Gemara, it was a special satisfaction for them. To know that the public sacrifice, the communal sacrifices, would not be offered except from funds that initially included theirs. They wanted to make sure that their funds were in it. They knew that it was covering them, regardless of whether their funds would be used or not. But they wanted to go liftei mishur sadin and do it. The problem with this is there's one major problem. I asked this question, I wrote it down 7 years ago. I still don't know the answer. Hanochas ruach hulehem. It was a special satisfaction for them. But we have a rule regarding the shkalim. Ha'oshir lo yarber va'ani lo yavit. The oshir is not allowed to give more, and the ani, the poor person, is not allowed to give less. Everybody has to be equal. Rabbi Gamliel's kids were getting much more satisfaction than the other people. Hanochatz ruach hulehem.
Yeah, but they didn't give more money.
No. So, but there's value. We all know, Daddy, that there's hanoah. The Gemara all over Shaks talks about the hanoah. For example, the hanoah that you're allowed to give it to a specific kohen, right? All over Shaks we talk about that you're allowed to give. There's a special hanoah that you have that you can choose which kohen you can give it, right? And that has value. The hanoah that you get has value.
Yeah, but when the Torah writes "Eoshia lo yarbe," it only talks about the amount of money, not the satisfaction.
What about the Toivus hanoah? But in Shas,
no, but that's
value. Shavak Kesed.
That's for something else in terms of
Here it says they wanted to be to get it from the box, which is Aleph.
Right.
They were getting the korbanos.
Right. But you know what? The Gemara uses the words hanochas ruach hulehem.
It was a satisfaction. There's no
maybe that shows that the personal satisfaction. They should be embarrassed that they're doing that.
No. In fact, the Gemara is going to go in a different direction. It's actually going to go just the opposite. The Gemara is going to praise them that they were zerizus, that they did things with great pressure. See, I'm not sure, Daddy, that's simple because there's a rule. You know that if Reuven lends money to Shimon and Shimon pays back the money, according to the Rosh, Shimon is not allowed to say thank you because that's
Ribbis Devorim.
Hanoas Devorim.
Yeah, but that's something. It's something. When the Torah says Eoshir lo yarbe, it means you cannot give more than a matzah shekel.
Even though you're getting Toivus hanoah.
Right.
I know, but wait a second. You're not supposed to give more than a shekel. What you receive back, there's nothing said about receiving.
Ooh,
it's only good. About giving.
Oh, Charlie, that's very good. That's a great
difference.
Answer. Charlie, I'm going to write that answer down. That answer I like. Oh, you're not going to give more, but you can take more out of it. That's Charlie. You got to tell that over to Rabbi Gibber. That's a very good one. That's
all right. You can tell it for me.
No, Charlie, that's a good chap. That's a good chap. All right. Let's go to, I'm just going to try to go quickly to the Mishnah in the next 5 minutes because mostly I got it. Here we go. Tony, they said, Daddy, you still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Just make sure because I couldn't see it. Very good.
I'm staying till the end.
You got it. Very good. Tani, Shamat Esakab Tavlios. The leather covers, what happens if the leather covers were accidentally removed from the heap? So that what happened is the new coins got mixed up with the old coins. Nasu Kulam Shirayim, they all become remainders and become invalid for future withdrawals. Tani, Shalishis who was a serious Shibikulat. The third withdrawal was the richest of them all. Shahaya is Taryoyis Shalzov and Darkanis Shalzov. Because it contained gold is Taris and gold Darkanis. We learned in a Friyadik Gemara. In an earlier Gemara, we said because the coins were so heavy, we allowed the ones who were schlepping the coins from far distant places to take the shekels and change them into larger bills, to change them into $100 bills, or in those cases, to change them into gold. So therefore, the coinage was more richer in the third one, which was coming from the most furthest distances. Tani, we learned. He performed the first ritual on behalf of Eretz, the people of Eretz Yisrael, and of course on behalf of all of Klal Yisrael. Shania l'shem karachim amukofim, l'shem Klal Yisrael. The second ritual is on behalf of the inhabitants of Ammon and Moab, the city around Eretz Yisrael, and behalf of all Klal Yisrael. The Shalishis, and the third by Sukkot, l'shem Bavel u'Madai, l'shem Medinas and l'shem Klal Yisrael. And under there, he did it with on behalf of the Bavel and Persia and all the inhabitants of all the distant countries like Italy, etc., and on behalf of all of Klal Yisrael. Why did they break it out? To give everybody their due. Because when you announce things, this was brought by X, Y, and Z, it brings covet to them, and they'll want to do it again next year. Tani, it's a basic 101 of fundraising. Tani, Noitel Minarishan, he would take money to purchase the covenant tziburs, the communal sacrifice from the first box. Even though there was leftover money in the first box, then he would take from the second box. Even though there was still money left in the second box, he would then take from the third box. When they finished up the third box, they went back to the remainder of the second box. If the money in the second box gets used up, they go back to the first box. If the funds of all three boxes were used up, they now take from the new shkalim that had not become shirayim, that had come subsequent to filling up those boxes, the new coins that came since that point. No, he can go back to the what do you call it? To the shirayim. Meaning, Rameya says that the shirayim keep their original kedusha. Shahaya Rameya Oima, because Rameya said we're on 9b2. 9b2. Malin b'shirayim shema yitzuchu lahem b'soif. One commits me'ilah, commits the avera of using kindness inadvertently for the misuse of holy stuff. If he misuses the remainder, because they might eventually be needed to purchase the carbon seaboards of the use of water. 9b2. Now, since Charlie, you mentioned about the sons of Rabbi Gamliel putting in the coins, and as you well put it, they gave a shekel, but they received personal satisfaction because they wanted to be part of the first batch of money that was used for the carbon seaboard. For this day came the famous Zerizus, those who are diligent to quickly do a mitzvah, may be become clean from Averis. By being quick to do mitzvahs, they will not come into their hands to do Averis. Nikiyas, cleanliness from Averis, Mevilade Tahara, brings one to purity. Tahara Mevil Kedusha, purity brings to holiness. Kedusha Mevil Anova, holiness brings to humility. Anova, humility Mevil Yiras Chet, brings to the fear of sin. Yiras Chet, we're on 9b3. 9b3. Mevil Chesidus, brings to pity, meaning a certain qualities in behavior. Chasidus maybe l'day ruach hakodesh. Pity brings to the divine inspiration. Ruach hakodesh maybe l'day tchias hamesim, brings to the power to resurrect the dead. Tchias hamesim maybe l'day eliyo zochel hatoyv. Those who have the power to theoretically raise the dead will be zocher to see Eliyo Hanavi. Zerizus maybe l'day nikius. Diligence brings to cleanliness, tiksiz, v'chilo mechaper. And the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, when he quickly finishes the Avodah, he finishes atoning in for the Beis Hamikdash. He does it quickly. By doing it quickly, he atones. Nikius maybe l'day tahara.
I always thought that Trias HaMesim will come after Eliyahu will come.
Right. So we'll get. Let's get. Daddy, let's get to the end of the Gemara, and then we'll talk about it. The key, it would go like the kiyus, maybe the tahara, cleanliness from sin brings to purity, the ksiv, the chibur aleh hakoyen, the tahara, and the kohen will atone for her, she will be purified. Tahara maybe the kedusha, the ksiv, the tahara, the kitchen. Kedusha maybe the day anova comes to holiness, brings to modesty, to humility, the ksiv. Thus spoke the exalted and lifted and uplifted one, who abides forever. Whose name is holy. I abide on high and in holiness, and I am with the shattered ones and those who are lowly of spirit. Holiness, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is with with the shattered ones, with the Daka and Shafal Ruach. Anova maybe l'day. Humility brings one to Yiras Chet, the Ksiv. Ekev Anova Yiras Hashem. The result of humility is fearing of Hashem. Yiras Chet maybe l'day Chasidus, the Ksiv. Chesed Hashem may oilam v'ad oilam al yireya. And the loving kindness of Hashem is forever and forever upon those who fear Him. The word chesed is unique to the Jewish language, to Lashon HaKodesh. No other language has a word for chesed. The word loving kindness is, believe it or not, the King James translation of the word chesed, because it's not a hava, it's not love, it's not rachum, mercy. It's a combination of all of them. It's a word that means everything, and it's hard to explain. We use the word loving kindness because it's the best way we can explain it in English. Chasidus may be l'day ruach hakodesh. I got that, by the way, from Rabbi Sachs. Chasidus may be l'day ruach hakodesh. Pity brings one to divine inspiration. The ksiv, oz dibarta b'chozon l'chasidecha. And you, Hashem, spoke in a vision to your pious one. Ruach HaKodesh may be l'tchias hamesim, the ksiv, because it says, v'nosati rucha b'chem v'hiyisem, and I shall put my spirit into you and you will live. So, Daddy, look at number 40 in the art scroll. This appears in the chapter that relates to the incident in which the Novi Yecheskel was Mechayim Esim. Afterwards, he prophesied regarding the ultimate resurrection of all Klal Yisrael, and he said, "V'nesati rucha b'chem v'chiyisem," and I will place my spirit into you, and you will live. So we see that comes through Ruach HaKodesh. So the answer is, Daddy, it's true that after Eliyahu Hanavi there will be the Tchias HaMesim, which, by the way, even that is not so. Because as you know from the Rambam, there are two separate animaments. There's animam munishleim revias hamashiach afal pishiyas mameya in kolzeh chakaloi b'chol yom shiyavod. The next animam is animam munishleim sheyei tchias hamesim dei shirotza yisparach shemoy. When Hashem wills it, Mashiach and tchias hamesim are two separate ideas. Mashiach, tchias hamesim will show up when it shows up. The Eitz HaRotza Yisparach Shemoy. When the Eibishter wants it. Nonetheless, the power of tchias hamesim exists in the world. Famous story. Rava and Rab Zera went out to collect money on Purim. And Rab Zera got drunk and he killed Rava. You remember this story? He killed Rava. The next day, Rab Zera wakes up from his drunkenness and he realizes he killed Rava. And the Gemara says, so he was Mechayim Mesim Rava. So the next year, Rab Zera says to Rava, let's go out and collect again on Purim. So Rava says to him, are you nuts? Last year you killed me. So Rab Zera says, so what? I'll be Mechayim Mesim you again. So Rava said, I'm not going to rely on a miracle. But the answer is, on some level, there is a power of tchias hamesim. On an individual basis.
Right.
Not on the global basis. On the global basis, that's coming later. Tchias hamesim, maybe the day Eliyahu Zochel HaToiv, right? Exceed the famous pasuk in Malachi. This pasuk is like the second or third to last of the last nevuah ever given, the last prophecy ever given. Hine anochi shelech lachem es Eliyahu hanovi liftnei bo yoim Hashem agadol ve'anoiro. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and awesome day of Hashem. And the next pasuk is ve'heishiv leibobois albonim ve'leibonim alaboisav. And the hearts of the fathers will return to the sons, and the hearts of the sons will return to the fathers. From here we learn that relationships between fathers and sons are tricky. Number two, that at the end, it's the hearts of the fathers that first come back to the sons, before the hearts of the sons come back to the fathers. The Haitian blame Obois, Albonim, Leiponim Alaboisam. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us, Shuve Elai, Shuve Aleichem, you return to me, and I will return to you. We turn around and say, Hashivenu Hashem Eilecha b'noshuva. You return to us, and we will return to you. Because the truth is, that's the way it's supposed to be. The father returns first, then the children. And now we finish. Tana b'shem Rameya. Whoever has a permanent residence in Eretz Yisrael, who medaber b'loshen hakodesh and speaks the holy language, v'oichel peroisa b'tahara, and eats the produce of Eretz Yisrael in a state of tahar, that means even chulin, that means even non-sacred food, v'koyre kriya shema b'boiku be'erev, and says shema in the morning and in the evening, yeh mebuser sheben olam habo. It should be heralded that he's a ben olam haba. We should return to you. We should learn to you. And tomorrow we start the fourth chapter.